With the moves that's happening in free agency at the quarterback position, does it signal that J.J. McCarthy is a Minnesota Viking? We're going to talk about this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson, always on the ones and twos. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I am a senior draft analyst. And guys, thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Sorry for being our everydayers, but I got to kick this intro to my guy, Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at The Talent Code. You talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ with those LSU Bengal Tigers, man. Here to bring you championship level content surrounding the NFL draft 24/7, 365, man. I want to start this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. And like I always say, man, hit the like button. Go ahead and comment after each segment. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel for the best NFL draft content where we talk draft prospects, draft strategies. And you know what, DP? Free agency affects the draft. And that's what we're talking about today, DP. We had an explosive day 1, day 2 of free agency, and it's going to affect the draft order, right? So we're going to talk about, hey, where are these quarterbacks going to land now? Because we had some sneaky good situations as far as free agency. Russell Wilson's with the Steelers, right? Then we have Kirk Cousins. He decided to go to Atlanta and shake some things up. So it's going to affect the draft prospects. What is the first running back off the board? DP, our guys, running backs got some money, man. They got paid. And then the interior defensive line position may be the position in question to where these guys fall to the second round. We are talking about all that today. So go ahead and hit the like button already, man. But DP, before we get started, man, why don't you hit them with our title sponsor?
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Keith, you said it. Quarterbacks, they did some shaking up day one of free agency, man. Kirk Cousins to the Falcons. Jacoby Brissett, signing with the Patriots. Baker Mayfield staying in Tampa. You know what I mean? Russell Wilson going to Pittsburgh. Gardner Minshew going to the Las Vegas Raiders. And Keith, the question is, how does that impact these quarterbacks? And for me, the question I have for you, seeing Kirk Cousins walk, seeing him go to the Falcons, right? Means the Falcons don't have to trade up. That was one of the teams that was talking about trading up for a QB. Does that mean that J.J. McCarthy is solidified himself? Not so much solidified himself. We believe he's going to be QB4. But is it almost like locked and loaded that he's going to the Minnesota Vikings?
No, not necessarily. And it's because what we talked about yesterday, right? There are other teams in there, and I'm just making sure that the New York Giants, they didn't sign anybody, right? So the New York Giants sitting there.
They still got Daniel Jones.
Yeah, they still have Daniel Jones. So, I mean, obviously, pick 2, right, is the Washington Commanders. Pick 3, the New England Patriots, right? They didn't necessarily address the quarterback situation. And then you're sitting there with the New York Giants at pick 6. So, if you're the Minnesota Vikings, did Atlanta clear some stuff up? Yes, but that don't necessarily mean that you're out of the clear, right? Because that's 4 spots for 4 quarterbacks. That's Chicago, Washington, New England, and the Giants sitting in front of you. So if you're the Minnesota Vikings, like I said, it made some things a little bit better. Now what you're hoping is clears a lot of stuff up is that maybe Justin Fields goes to one of those spots, right? And then now that clears up stuff for you even further, right? If Justin Fields ends up for the New York Giants or something like that, then you're like, okay, maybe we have a chance to stand pat and be good. And because I want to talk about this, we always talked about the Las Vegas Raiders needing a quarterback, but you may not have to worry about them moving up because they signed Gardner Minshew. And I think what it does is when you get these quarterback situations, it takes you out of desperation mode, right? Like the Raiders may feel like, you know what, we don't have to be desperate anymore. We can stand pat. We can wait to the second round, third round. We'll grab a guy that we feel like we can develop, but we trust who Gardner Minshew is just to win some games. They're establishing a culture. They signed Christian Wilkins, which we'll talk about at the end of the show. So they're spending money establishing a culture. They have some skill position pieces. So now we don't have to be desperate with Gardner Minshew if you're the Las Vegas Raiders.
And with the Raiders, that's why I view that QB4 spot, right? Because I do think that for Minnesota, I think that everything is aligning for you to get JJ. But what it's aligning for you to do is call the Chargers up. I keep putting in my mock drafts and trade up because you can't, like you said, you can't sit pat and just hope JJ falls to you.
And the other issue is that Denver is right behind you, right? And so the thing is that and the reason I say that is because what you're going to give up is probably going to have to be very comparable when we're talking about like sliding positions and value of draft picks. And you know how they do the numbers and it's like they come up with the averages of what it takes to get that pick. Well, they're only one pick behind you. So you're probably going to have to give up very similar stuff. And we know that Denver appears to be a team that with the Sean Payton conversation, right? And him wanting a young guy, him wanting his own guy, that Denver's right there. So you have to figure that thing out. You almost, I think it cleared the water to say, you know what? We may have to be a little aggressive, right? It cleared it up to see exactly, I guess, who's your opponents when it comes to moving up and being able to get a quarterback. And can I say this, DP, real quick, is that, and I tweeted this out yesterday, and it's that they have some of the best skill positions. You give me Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hockenson, and Aaron Jones, right? I mean, if I'm a quarterback, I'm signing up for that, right? If I'm Justin Fields, I'm like, get me over there ASAP. Especially with the head coach Kevin O'Connell. So
no, 100%, right? It's just, and that's why, you know, if you're the Vikings, you're in a great spot in terms of whether you try to call Chicago, see if they're willing to trade Justin Fields, but worst case scenario, or probably best case scenario for you, so you don't have to worry about having to be declined from an in division trade, which we rarely ever see in the NFL, especially at the quarterback position, to go up and get JJ McCarthy. But I look at those Raiders, man, it's like, okay, you got Aidan O'Connell, you got Gardner Minshew. That sounds okay to me. But I'm sitting at 14, and I'm like, man, Michael Penix's medicals came back clear, right? We got Devontae Adams. You know what? I can stand. If you want Penix, you can sit there at 14 and wait for him to fall down the board.
I would bring the conversation up for the Minnesota Vikings, right? Like if you feel good. And I really like that situation because we know the gunslinger that Penix is mentally, right? And even like, and we talked about this, right? We talked about this immediately after the Senior Bowl, and in those conversations, I said, you know what? I kind of liked him under center. I didn't think he looked too bad, right? And we know, you know, in O'Connell's system, he's gonna have to get under center sometimes, right? And do some play action type stuff. So I like that. And then you give him those weapons, like I just said, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hockenson, and Aaron Jones, right? That's a good spot. And maybe that's a transition spot to where they like, you know what? We'll figure out the rest of this. We'll get a free agent somehow. And then we could stand pat, not have to give up a lot of draft conversation, and then go get a Michael Penix, which could be the same conversation for the Raiders also.
And it's crazy, Keith, because we talked about QB 3 and 4. It should have been QB 4 and 5 instead. I don't know why I put 3 and 4. But either way, when we talking about these guys, we expect the first 3 picks to be QBs. JJ McCarthy, whether it's the Giants, Minnesota moves up, I think there's a strong chance we can get 5 quarterbacks off the board in the top 20 picks. I really do. Yeah. Especially after Penix's, medicals came back clear. He looked I think because he, like you talked about him, like being under center at the Senior Bowl, it was kind of a learning experience for him where he couldn't just get into a rhythm. Watching him walk out there at the combine the other week when it was time for him to get on the field and throw, he looked like it was game day to him. He looked locked in. He was zeroed in. He was focused, right? The confidence on his face, everything. So it was like, man, for his performance, he was accurate. He was everything we saw on tape, right? And then you get the green light on the medicals. Yeah, if I'm a team like the Raiders, where you're going to run the ball, get under center, you got Adams, you got Michael Mayer, and Michael Mayer needs an accurate quarterback too. We talked about that ourselves last year. I don't remember if we talked about on the pod as much because we took the pod over a little bit late in the process last year, but that was one of the things about Michael Mayer is like he can separate quickly, but he maintain the separation because he wasn't the best like explosive athlete. Putting a Michael Penix into that, having Mike to Mike, right? Michael Penix to Michael Mayer. Sign me up for that if I can get that.
Yeah, no, 100% with DP. Listen, man, quarterbacks, there's always the talking point. They're always the main talking point. Oh. But who stole the show thus far when it comes to free agency? Running backs. Running backs stole the show. So that's going to affect the running backs in the draft. And we're going to talk about the Blake Corums, the Trey Bensons, right? Now with a prime situations for them. And all we're seeing if the NFL paid these running backs in free agency, are we seeing the NFL value running backs even more? So we may see some running backs get bumped up the board some. So DP, we about to have this conversation next with the running backs. Where will the first running back come off the board in the 2024 NFL draft?
Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number one seed, it's time to go dancing, guys, on America's number one sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm going to repeat that. New customers get $200 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on everything from point spreads to money lines. You can even pick who's gonna win it all. All right. So, guys, it's very simple of what you need to do. You need to just visit fanduel.com/locked on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Go and visit FanDuel.com/locked on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Keith, in the second round of my mock, the first RB off the board was Blake Corum. And I don't care if anybody in the comments put low-hanging fruit. I put him to the Chargers. I put him with Jim Harbaugh, right? Well, Jim Harbaugh went and signed Gus Edwards from the Baltimore Ravens yesterday. Yep. So, like, you know what I mean? It did the running backs, and like you said, they got paid. And because remember last offseason, it was like, you know, with the running back class we had in 2023, what was the narrative was, man, I'd hate to be a free agent running back right now. This class is too good. Now you flip, and the free agent class gets paid. And I think part of it's because the narrative is there's no blue chip running back prospect in the 2024 class. There may not be a Bijan or a Jameer, but this is still a good group of backs that you can get yourself a starter depending on the scheme you run, what you value. But seeing Saquon Barkley get 3 years, $37 million, Josh Jacobs getting signed to the Packers, right? You know, for a multi-year deal. Then watching Tony Pollard go from Dallas to teaming up with Tajay Spears in Tennessee with the Titans. Then Aaron Jones as a free agent the next day. Today goes and signs with the Vikings. DeAndre Swift, Keith, gets a big deal or gets a nice deal to go and play for the Bears. Then Austin Eckler goes to
the Commanders.
Goes to the Washington Commanders, and the Devin Singletary goes to replace Saquon Barkley. So it's crazy because now I do wonder, when does the first running back come off the board? After all these movements, and like I said, I felt like Jim Harbaugh was going to be that team that would say, hey, let's go ahead and get our running back. But then they get Gus Edwards. I still think they draft one, Keith, but it's like it's probably gonna be more of a explosive guy where I don't know if you draft Blake Corum to pair with Gus Edwards rather than trying to pair him with a more explosive, dynamic weapon out of the backfield. I think the first running back off the board, crazy enough, I think it's gonna be third round, Keith. I think this might have knocked those running backs down a little bit.
Okay, so obviously first round was never in the question, right? There was never in the question. Second round, I'm looking at it, right? You have the Carolina Panthers at the top, the Patriots, Cardinals, and top of the second meet is still, in my opinion, the value doesn't necessarily meet the proven production / potential, right? But I'll look at I think the back end of the second to me, like once you get to pick 50-ish, I could potentially see that to where a running back comes off the board somewhere in that range. I'd liken this, and it's even different. You know what? It may be more difficult because I just said the proven production. And when you look at Kenneth Walker, he had production at Michigan State right that year with the first running back off the board fell to the second round. It's Blake Corum for me, but when we talk about the production point, but I think the potential point what teams are going to get excited about is Trey Benson. And it's because of the high level flashes that he had at Florida State, but then also him putting that 4.39 down, right? People are like, hey, this might be a bell cow type of back, right? He might be the back that we can give the ball to 20 plus carries. And you talk about a team like Tennessee, I thought that this would have been a good fit for Tennessee, right? But I think they only have 1 second round pick, I believe. But I would have liked to pair him with the Tajay Spears more than a Tony Pollard at the time, right? So I'm looking at this, and I think, I don't know, DP. I feel like on the other side of it is that maybe the NFL is showing us that they value running backs, right? And so maybe that's why they kind of stay solidified. So I don't know if it moves it too much, but if I had to pick a spot, it's still 50 and beyond, right? I still think it's somewhere right there. And that matches with our TDN top 100s and our personal big boards also.
No, and I mean, to your point, so I think you make a very compelling argument there, because looking at the second round, the draft order, right? And you think about, of course, we still got some other Derrick Henry still got to, pick where he's going. You know what I mean? We got J.K. Dobbins sitting out there coming off a torn Achilles. We don't know whenever he does sign, it's probably going to be a short-term deal to prove he can stay healthy, because he's been out back-to-back years. But the big fish left at age 30 is Derrick Henry. And, you think about teams when looking at the second round, and after like the 50th pick, you're talking about the Dallas Cowboys, right? Yep. The Houston Texans, the Baltimore Ravens. You know what I mean? Those are three teams in general. I think, and that's what goes to your point. If there was a spot in that second round, it'd be after 50.
Yeah, I think Baltimore is a prime position, right? I think you get that downhill running game with a guy like a Trey Benson. You know what I'm saying? Like an explosive runner that can do some different things. I think that sets up for some real fun stuff.
At the combine too, if I remember correctly. He talked about how he would love to be in the backfield with Lamar Jackson and how crazy of a talented duo they would be in that backfield. Like, no, 100%. It just, like I said, like we talk about, like wherever Derrick Henry goes, that's where it's going to be like, okay, because if Derrick Henry goes to Baltimore, they probably won't take one in the second round. But you still got Dallas, right? Tony Pollard's gone. You got Deuce Vaughn, the kid out of South Carolina. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he did some good things running the ball for Dallas. Is it Rick? I can't remember his name at
Rico
all.
Dowdle.
Yeah. So you got those two. I think is like the backs there. If Rico isn't a free agent, Dallas is definitely a team that has to look at this.
They need
this running back class.
At this point, they need to sign Derrick Henry and go get somebody else, right? Like it's just that mode of desperation for them with the running back situation. I think all of those spots, DP, are really good spots, and I'm trying to even look early in the second round. The New York Giants at pick 47, DP, are they comfortable with their running back situation? Like, if I'm a Giants fan, I am nervous because I am, and I'm gonna say that again. I am nervous, DP, if I'm a Giants fan, because we lost Saquon Barkley for nothing at all, right? I don't know if a compensatory pick is involved in that. Yeah, it's just,
it might get a comp pick.
But nothing, right? Overall, nothing. You got nothing for him. And that was our best offensive football player. Our quarterback, we're kind of out on. Our receivers,
tight ends talking about possibly retiring.
Tight ends talking about retiring. Our receivers are talented, but question marks, right? You know what I'm saying? We're still trying to figure it out. So what is the offensive identity, right? If I'm Brian Daboll, I'm walking around, I'm flipping chairs, I'm flipping tables, I am kicking stuff, DP, because I need something to work with, and thus far you haven't given me anything to work with. So I agree with you 100% on that. But the Giants may be a spot that look for a running back situation. The Raiders, I don't think the Raiders signed. Right, because they
Jacobs go, and they're rolling, like, I think as of right now, they're rolling with Zamir White.
Zamir White, and we both thought Zamir White was extremely talented coming out. So maybe they're a team that goes after in the fourth round. So
I think there would still be a team, maybe not second, but the third round, that you still bring in another guy, because at the end of the day, like, you don't know what you're gonna get from Zamir. He's only, like, he had a couple games towards the end of the season when Josh Jacobs got hurt after AP took over as head coach, where you can see the flashes. You're like, man, he could be a really good starter for us, but you still might want to look at getting another guy, you know what I mean, and bring in some more talent on late day 2 where you say, you know what, here's a change of pace type of running back, a guy that we work with, whether it is Blake Corum, right, and stuff like that. Because you still, because Zeus tore both his ACLs.
Yeah, I think he tore one because I recruited him a little bit when I was at LSU. I believe he tore one his senior year of high school, and then he tore another one his freshman or sophomore year of college, I believe. So
you think about Bucky Irvin, Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright from Tennessee. Talking about adding some more juice. I get it, guys. I know somebody like Bucky Irvin didn't test that explosive. Don't care. Watch his tape. He ran fast. So the point is, like, you can add some more, just a change of pace to that running back room on late day 2, especially potential early day 3, where you have Zamir. He could be your bell cow early in the games, but for that pass catching upside and that kind of jitterbug, there's multiple backs that can fill those roles in this draft, Keith.
Yep, I agree 100% with DP. Let's keep this thing going and flowing, man. And we're talking about the positions, free agency reactions, right, and how this is going to affect the NFL draft. And now we have to go to the interior defensive line. DP, there's been some mock drafts, right, where we've had as many as 3-4 interior defensive linemen at a time. But is this the position, DP, with such heavily loaded at quarterback and wide receiver and offensive tackle and cornerbacks are elevating? Is this the position, when we're talking about free agent reaction with Christian Wilkins signing with the Raiders, right, that removes a spot? DP, I know you had that in your mock draft with Jerzon Newton. Is this a position that potentially falls to the second round because of the free agency reactions and all of the positional value at other positions in the 2024 NFL draft? We're going to talk about that, our viewpoint, our perspective on it, coming up next.
Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing that you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Go for a run, take a nap, read a book. What would you do? We always talk about, man, I wish I had more time. The question is, more time for what? If time was unlimited, what would you do? How would you use it? All right. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. Guys, I'm telling you now, having someone that's unbiased and objective that can help you understand the things that's going on in your life, the things that goes on in your mind, is so valuable. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thank y'all for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today.
Yes,
every day. Shout out for being our everydayers, man. Gotta give y'all flowers. Keith, those big boys on interior defensive line. You talking about Jerzon Newton, Byron Murphy II, Braden Fisk, your guy, right?
Chris Jenkins. Braden Fisk. Yep. And listen, Brett, the mock drafts get blown up, right? Because my latest mock draft, so from 2 weeks ago, I had them going after Braden Fisk, the Houston Texans, and they signed, I forgot who they signed in free agency, but they signed a pretty good defensive tackle, right? So that is potentially a non-landing spot when it comes to free agency. But DP, answer the question. I want to ask you the question for you to answer it. Do you foresee the interior defensive line position falling down draft boards when everything is considered and all the different factors in this 2024 NFL draft?
Slightly, I do, Keith. You know, because you was talking about the Nico Autry. Now, granted, he's a little bit older, but he's still a very good player on that interior defensive line and a guy that fits that DeMeco Ryans system well for the Texans, right? Leonard Williams re-upped after being traded to the Seattle Seahawks. Christian Wilkins gets a big deal to go to the Raiders. Chris Jones gets a big deal to stay with the Kansas City Chiefs. So in most of my mocks, I had both Byron Murphy and Johnny Jerzon Newton coming off the board in round 1. I do think that we, at this point, we probably get only one. And at the same time, I'm kind of struggling to find a spot for that. I think Texas could, because the Nico Autry is 34, it's still open for the Texans to do so.
Sure.
But it's like, well, what if there's a better edge on the board, right?
My question would be, I agree with that. And then also I would ask the question of the size, because two of the defensive tackles that we believe are the most talented, right, is Jerzon Newton and Byron Murphy. I was about to say Byron Young, Byron Murphy, both guys who would be deemed quote unquote undersized as the defensive tackle position, right? Or that's the underlying consensus, right? But extremely talented, first step explosiveness, like very talented football players. But does that also play a factor, right? Is that the profile of these guys are not 6'3", 6'4", 320, right? That you have a little bit of nervousness even drafting these guys this high because you're worrying about, hey, how they're gonna hold up against the run, and how certain things going to play out to where you're like, you know what, I may just try to get one of those guys in the second round, or I'm not willing to, I guess kind of bite that high on these guys because I still have some question marks. And we had Kalijah Kancey as I guess you say a case study last year, and he went 19. And he was, some people believed he was the best defensive tackle. So if you ask me, I can definitely see one of those guys falling, if not multiple of them fall into the second round, and that becomes a spot where the defensive linemen go, or the interior defensive linemen.
It could be a little bit of a run on day 2 with these guys, right? We talked about Murphy and Newton, but Ruko Tyler Davis, right?
So
Michael
those
Hall
are
Jr.
the Ruko and the Justin Igboigbees, right? Those guys that are 6'3.5", 320, right? Those are the guys that are wild card factors, the Braden Fisk, right? Because I look at the size, and I'm, and you've scouted with me enough, right, to know that I'm just not a size guy. But we're talking about playing in the trenches. It matters, right? It does matter to some capacity. So, and especially stopping a run, I wonder if we can see NFL teams will opt for those bigger framed guys versus, like we said, the Jerzon Newtons, the Byron Murphys, right? Things like that. So could potentially make one of those guys who are consensus D tackle 1 and D tackle 2, right? If you use that label, slip down the board a little more because teams opt for other things.
Oh, 100%. I think especially like, T'Vondre Sweat, right? Like
I was gonna ask you about that. Like, is this how do T'Vondre Sweat with this situation?
I think with the guys going in free agency that we talked about, pushing the top 2 guys, the top 2 consensus guys potentially to the second round, that can knock him down. And then when you have like we're talking about with Rook, Rook being almost 6'3", he's like, I think he dropped weight, so he's like 295, 300. Rook being so strong and physical as he is,
it's a different,
do we, because again, we talked about it. T'Vondre's going to have to beat that Jordan Davis, that Jordan Davis comp, and in such a negative way, unfortunately, right? Because how people view Jordan Davis, right? Great run defender. How long can I rely on him? And it's the same kind of conversations about T'Vondre. So it's like, will teams say, you know what? I could take a guy like a Rook and put him as like a 5-tech defensive end in the odd front, and on passing downs, reduce him inside into a 4-eye or a 3-tech, and let him collapse the pocket with his 34-inch arms, his power, his quickness off the ball, and then we can develop him even more. Brandon Dorless, that's another tweener who could play defensive end and then reduce down to his best pass rush opportunities is when he's aligned ahead of guard. So this interior defensive line group, to me, Keith, it's a good group of guys, but I do feel like because of what happened in free agency, and as you alluded to at the beginning, it's just so much talent at other positions, corner. And then like I saw a tweet the other day with people, like somebody was saying that D line, especially interior D lines, is becoming more of a premium position, which makes sense because that's the quickest way to the quarterback. It's right up the middle of the offensive line, right? It seems like it took too long for us to get to this type of revelation, but here we are. But will teams say, man, I need a corner? Or will they value just getting that guy on the trenches to help frustrate the quarterback to where you say, you know what, I'll grab a corner next round or the round after that, but you still got receivers. Still got a bunch of tackles on day 2 as well, Keith. You know what I mean? That, Kieran Amagadegi, Christian Jones, and all these different, it's a ton of tackles still. So it's
Brandon
like,
Coleman,
man, like,
there's a lot of guys.
A lot of guys.
Delmar Glaze, a lot of guys.
It's tight ends. I think there could be a little tight end bunch on day 2 as well with Theo Johnson and Jatavian Sanders. You know what I mean? And those guys, it's just the interior defensive line group is good, but we're going to see how the NFL really values their impact, especially to start the season, or will they go for more immediate impact players?
Yeah, no, agree 100%. And we know how important running the football is becoming offensively. So we know how important defensive line play is becoming. Yeah, as far as, like you said, like a position to emphasize, right? But DP, that wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Man, I want to say shout out to everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. Listen, if you haven't hit that like button, go ahead and hit that like button. If you haven't commented, drop your comment. What do you think is going to happen to running backs, interior defensive line? Where do you see these quarterbacks going now post some of the initial free agency shakeups and things that's going on? So make sure you drop a comment. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel and tell a friend that this is the best NFL draft content out there. But listen, man, I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there, that's my co-host, man, Damian Parson. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we always like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube, wherever you listen to the podcast, to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. We talked about it last week. We wanted to get into that Brock Bowers conversation. But guys, you know what happens when news breaks? We talk about it, all right? So now we got a little bit of time, unless some other stuff happens and we bring it back to the news. But let's get into that Brock Bowers conversation tomorrow and how me and Keith may have some differing opinions on the skill set and talent.
We will. That is locked in, right?
We absolutely do have different opinions, but we both love the guy. We just love him in a different way. So we're going to talk about that and more tomorrow. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.